Hi, and welcome to another episode of What Teachers Have to Say. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Jake, and we have a pretty different episode today.
Yeah.
If you are interested in the razor cutting edge of artificial intelligence and the research happening around its intersection with education, this is the episode for you. We are reporting live. We're podcasting live? Not live.
Not live.
We are recording in a hotel room in Sunnyvale, California after yesterday's attendance at the AI+Education Summit at Stanford University, hosted by the Human Artificial Intelligence Lab of Stanford.
Yeah.
The people.
Human.
In Silicon Valley.
Artificial.
Epicenter.
Intelligence Lab.
Yeah. And I'll put a little teaser out there to our listeners. Stay to the end because we end with a one-word wrap-up that was surprising. I have to say it was not what I thought I was going to get out of yesterday.
No, not at all. Like I was thinking more, current research practice, what's coming down the pipeline. And that was there on full display.
I thought it was going to be like, things that are inaccessible to me, but will be coming down the pike.
Exactly.
And it wasn't.
No, it was
Very
questions.
different.
It was conversations.
Very
it was
cool.
joyful. It was interesting. It was so affirming to see that we're really all in this together. We're all on the same page, and we're actually trying, even within the industry, to move toward human flourishing using artificial intelligence in education, and that there's so much possibility there. It's just very, very exciting.
It is.
And this is a good conversation and debrief from that event. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. And as always, before we dive into the meat of it, we'd like to restate that the work we do here on our podcast is not affiliated in any direction with the public institutions for which we work. This is just a platform that we feel passionate about. I really enjoy doing it. I'm so grateful to do it. Yeah. But it's just to advance the conversation in education. There are things that remain unsaid sometimes. And we get to peek under a hood yesterday.
We did.
The ivory tower was opened. And I'm a pretty harsh critic. I'm a really hard critic when it comes to universities and the ivory tower mentality. Yeah. But it was a beautiful opportunity. And so in the spirit of advancing communication and advancing voice, which we do talk about missing voices.
We do.
We would love to hear your voice. If you have that inclination that you want to be part of what we're doing, if you want to be a guest on the podcast, reach out, send us an email, whatteachershavetoSay@gmail.com, and we would love to open up that conversation with you.
And definitely follow us on Apple Music and Spotify. It does help.
It does. I know people have asked, how can we help? And actually following us on both platforms and leaving up to a 5-star review, it takes just a second, but it is actually quite meaningful to our platform and where we're hoping to go.
Exactly.
All right, off we go. So yesterday was amazing.
Amazing.
So we were at the University of Stanford. I said that weird. We were at Stanford University.
We were at
in
Stanford
Palo
University.
Alto, California. Ivy League of the West. And we had been invited to the AI+Education Summit, which was freaking incredible.
Yeah, from the place where all of this is coming from, right?
Yeah, it really is the heart of Silicon Valley.
It is.
Right? Like
We
so
are right in
much of the brain trust of technology is kind of incubated at Stanford.
If you're not aware, the difference between a conference and a summit is basically you all do the same things all day.
And it's invitation. And we'll talk about the balance of who was brought.
Stay tuned. Definitely. Very, very interesting selection of who was actually there.
But overall, an incredible event. Such kind people.
Wonderful people.
Like really kind people. Everybody was hobnobbing with everybody and sharing contacts and business cards and stickers. I had stickers.
Of course
I do.
Super friendly. Met some really great grad students who are working on some incredible projects in artificial intelligence that are really going to change the way that we teach within the next few years. So it was just kind of incredible to see all of that incubation happening, talk to these people that are so excited about what they're doing and what it can do for teachers. Like overall, it was a very, very positive event.
Very positive.
And very illuminating.
Yeah. I can't wait to go next year already.
This is the second one.
Yep.
They called the summit right after GPT launched last year, the first one, and I don't think
there were about
really
100
intended.
attendees. It was very, very small.
I don't think they intended it to be an annual thing, but they're definitely making it that now.
Well,
rightly
people had
so.
come from international.
Yep. We had international educators and thought leaders in artificial
Industry
intelligence
people
there,
and-
industry people.
It was quite an impressive guest list.
Yeah, it was.
And us.
And us. I know. That was
great.
That was very...
But I think it would be great. We'll be unpacking a lot. There's so much.
There's so much. So
much. I mean, it was literally like, what was it, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. or something like that. It was a long,
it was nearly a 12-hour day.
But it's going to take some time to marinate. But we've got a couple of really salient points that are bubbling to the surface already after having slept on it just a little bit. So I thought it'd be rad. I think we just need to share a couple of the takeaways.
Yeah.
Some of the interesting things and little critiques that we saw.
Yep. From the teacher perspective.
From the teacher perspective.
Teachers have to say about it.
So if we talk about the demographic, there were just under, I believe, 400 registrants.
Yeah.
We caught wind of maybe 3 to 5 practicing K-12 teachers.
Yeah, that we ran into. Largely, most of the people I was we're talking to were from either Stanford. There was a lot of faculty and researchers and PhD candidates and that whole thing. And then most of the other people I talked to were in the industry.
Yeah. I mean, there was James Stayer, the founder and CEO of Common Sense, was there. Common Sense Media.
Common Sense Media.
Pat from code.org.
Yep.
A host of Google people. There were Saul Khan was there. Wonderful fireside chat with Saul Khan.
Yeah.
Such a nice guy.
Shout out to Chris Peach, who's doing incredible
the best
work.
Joyful person on the planet.
Yeah, Chris Peach honestly gives me hope for the future of artificial intelligence.
I know. I want to have an episode with Chris that's just on finding joy in ed tech. I think that the whole day was so positive, wonderfully positive, and also a little out of balance.
Bringing it back around to not very many educators being there.
We were a hot ticket.
We were actually very. We were like, "Wait, what are you doing in your class? How are you using AI?
You have
what modalities
students?
are you doing? What is your model?" I don't know if I've ever had people really clamoring to listen to what I have to say as much. Yeah, kind of. My dance card was fully punched.
Yep, fully punched.
And they're like, "Wait, what? What is this?" And I was like, pretty much my class is an artificial intelligence lab.
I mean, we met people and in an hour and a half, we've been invited to lunch with the Google people.
Yep, we're going to lunch at the Google
people in the Google for Education and Bard.
I haven't used Bard as much, but they're really innovating on that platform. And Google wants to stay relevant in education and in the ed tech sphere. Yeah, I see that
they've got some work to do because they decreased the age limit to 13, but not for students associated with school accounts.
Really?
I just saw that this morning, so I'm going to be asking today.
Okay.
I'll ask that team today, wait a minute.
So on school devices, it's still...
it specifically says
interesting,
not Google Workspace for education accounts. Yeah. That's still 18 plus.
We'll need to iron that out.
Here's my first critique. Yeah. We'll start with that one because we have so many positive things. But here's my critique, and I think it's important to be critical of things like this. One of the panelists mentioned that universities have burned education in the past.
Absolutely.
I loved that she brought that up, and she was talking specifically about learning modalities.
Yes.
Right? And so to spread the word, we know that learning modalities, kinesthetic or all of those things are not a thing.
It's not real, people.
The research has disproven that.
Yeah.
And so university models pushed that to a whole industry has risen up around teachers creating multiple modality lessons specifically for this.
So differentiation specifically to kinesthetic or auditory. You might learn better one way than another, but it doesn't mean that that's actually the best way for you to learn. We all learn using all of the senses we have.
Yeah, even before I really saw that research behind it, I pushed back and saying okay, well, maybe you prefer auditory input, but shouldn't we be rounding out the human being?
Right.
Giving opportunity for all of those other things. Oh, you like running? Okay, you're only going to go running now.
Right. Yeah.
No powerlifting.
That's the only exercise you can do.
No art,
Only running.
So, but not to belabor that. But, such teacher focus positive, beautiful teacher focus at the summit. They
Yes.
were all about like, well, here's a couple of quotes. I loved that we need to focus on building capacities and value, not expertise. And that was by Dr. Amanda Bickerstaff. Really cool, where she's talking about like process over product and like how do we facilitate teachers so that this doesn't just crush them with more workload.
Yeah, it's one more thing.
Yeah, I feel like there was a constant vibe of we can't become one more thing.
Yes.
You know, so often they were saying we need to meet teachers where they already are to be additive to their current practice without adding more burden.
Yeah, that was encouraging.
It was throughout the entire
and
day.
And it was through everything.
And yet also here's my critique pushback.
Mm-hmm.
There were no primary source moments for people that were K-12 practitioners.
Yeah.
Zero panelists, zero posters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, so much of it was talking about voice and equity. The whole message of from educators came filtered through a researcher.
It did. And the closest it got was, you know, there are researchers.
Yeah, they have the D school. They have a school on campus.
Right. And they
like
have
the school for children.
The School of Education. A lot of those faculty members are former teachers at middle school or something. But, you know.
And not to negate their experience at all.
No.
But it's very different.
It is. It was probably pre-COVID.
It's probably pre-COVID.
And not to discount their experience, but they haven't been boots on the ground for a while. So there is a disconnect that happens there, whether you like it or not. It's like once you step out of being a primary class teacher, you lose your lab. That's how I'm kind of thinking about it these days, because you lose that space where things are real.
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah.
You know, and also just the lens of such a prestigious research facility. I guess my critique isn't to defame that at all, but just to say that there was a lot of people who taught adults.
Totally.
You know, they're all university faculty and things like that. But that would be my critique. So hopefully, like, I'm going to hold out hope that next year we see panelists, front and center.
Absolutely.
You know, there was usually like 4 panelists at a time. If one of them, even if it was one during the day.
Yeah. And really some of those partnerships, because a lot of those research projects are actually partnered with school districts.
Yeah. Bring somebody from that district.
Someone from that, that incubator where you're doing that project to your summit.
I think it would just be additive.
But, it's honestly, it's the second one, and they're just trying
like
to
no
figure
shame,
out where
no
to go
hate.
and how to do it.
Wonderful activity. Wonderful day spent.
So let's get to the how to do it part.
Yeah.
Okay. So
bring it up. What do you want to do?
So
I have no idea what you're going to say right now.
So James from Common Sense, his panel went off.
James Stayer, wonderful
He was
dude.
essentially the moderator, but he definitely was like, no, this is my time to shine.
He pushed.
And he pushed so hard. And I love to see it. I love to see it.
And I feel like the panelists were there for it.
They were a little in the hot seat for sure.
There was a little blood pressure raising moments.
Yeah. He was being very real, where the legislation that was formed was informed by Common Sense Media, and he actually pulled the curtain back a little bit and was like, we're actually working on legislation right now, or guidelines for guardrails for AI. We're going to try to set the tone on that in the next couple weeks. But he was just really, really pushing and asking the audience and calls to action of, what are we going to do? How are you going to get this in classrooms? How are you going to train teachers? How are you going to what's the rollout look like?
Well, and he was like, what did he say about 5 years?
Yeah, he was like, in 5 years.
What do you see happening? Will there be a shift? And it was very rhetorical. You could see that he was like, because then he was like,
I want to see what happens.
We better shift within 5 years. He was not mincing words.
No, he wasn't. And he was super,
and he has the clout to do it.
He was super critical of social media companies and the ways in which those companies have leveraged AI, which is in a very negative way and has a very negative impact on especially children, where the the AI algorithms that exist within every social media platform is built for marketing.
Yeah.
And the kind of the presupposition of marketing, if you ever watch Mad Men,
Yeah,
or
right.
like really, the ad game really is to create need, and to create need means to foster doubt and negative feelings and reinforce those. And that is how it has played out.
And I feel like that
kids.
Metaphor was kind of reverberated all day. It was like, we can't do the failed experiment called social media again.
We can't do social media again. And then they were like, we burned all the bridges by letting that happen. And so schools are suspicious of us. James kept coming back to that. And he's like, oh yeah, Sam and Zuck. And he's like,
I was talking to Sam yesterday.
I gotta go ask him, make sure that I gotta talk to. It was like throwing his clout around pretty hard, but it was also just interesting to listen to someone who actually does have access to these people, and who is very critical of their current approach.
And in the legislative side of it too, right? Like Common Sense Media is giant, and I loved. There was a question that I think he raised. It was definitely during that session. I apologize. I'm not exactly certain who said it, but they were talking about like, do we need to rewrite the legislation for data privacy and usage and protecting, protected classes and all of this stuff. And I love that the panelists pushed back a little bit, and they're like, well, yeah, we do, but also, and here we go back to like voice. And they were like, what would happen if we rewrote that to really protect the individual, while also delivering the needful data to the research world in order to advance the science?
Right. So that was an interesting issue.
Very interesting.
Because all of artificial intelligence is coming from industry, and it's largely a black box.
Could be a big problem,
and
right?
It could be a big problem.
One tiny tweak in an algorithm that you figure out could be hugely beneficial financially. And so they're not sharing those things.
No. So circling back to that idea of that James kept bringing up, like, how do we roll this out? How do we roll it out? How do we train teachers? He just would not let that go.
No, he was hammering
it. And that was a really, and then how do we change the legislation? Like, how do we amend FERPA laws so that researchers can access data to make better artificial intelligence, not to collect your data for nefarious marketing purposes, to collect your data so that we can make these interactions more effective. There was another thing that came up, teach effects. Okay. So teach effects is the research brainchild of, I think it was Dora Demsky and her team that was working on it. Fantastic platform that they're trying to use to analyze real student teacher interactions. And then process those to see where that magic is happening in terms of what an actual mentor does, because it's a very complex process to make a decision related to what does this student need.
Was this the team that was talking about how current LLMs actually don't have good pedagogical approaches?
They were.
Yeah, they were like, they're really kind of, it'll write a lesson plan for you, but it's a little paltry.
Exactly. Wasn't built for
Although I should say, for people listening, at least I know OpenAI, right? So GPT will align lesson plans to edu protocols.
Nice. All of them will align them to standards. Which is cool.
But it will. It totally will like build lessons around edu protocols. Sometimes it hallucinates and makes up things, but I'm like, that's an interesting one. That should become an edu protocol.
But that was how we discovered hexaflexagons. Dude.
Nice.
Look up hexaflexagons. And we were laughing because we thought it was a hallucination, but it's actually I'm got to use that.
Absolutely.
Now. It's an amazing
for hexagonal thinking.
For hexagonal thinking, it would be awesome.
Amanda Bickerstaff. In her presentation. She asked a rhetorical question that really kind of hurt to hear. And it said, do people want efficiency if it now means you have 150 students and not 30?
Right.
And I don't think that's where she was like, this is where we're headed. No. It was really like a, hey. Well, and you've talked a lot about like historically technological advances lead to more
every
requirement.
technological advance in industry then will require further productivity from the worker. Like if you really look at it that way, like every single one, email,
God, can we do away with that now?
your smartphone, and then just further back, cotton gin, if you want to go real dark. Every leap forward requires like more from the humans that are beholden to the technology.
Where we're like, hey, let's alleviate some of the burden in order to make space for humanizing, for the human connection, to increase human connection. Where I think that her posing that question was raising the red flag of if we don't do this purposefully, it's going to turn into 150 students.
It will become this.
And we've seen it.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I don't want to say where it was because I've forgotten, but there was like the teaching shortage is real.
It's very
real. And so there are schools that have had to put multiple classes together, like in a multi-purpose room with a teacher and a couple of yard duties.
Yeah.
And they're all on Edgenuity or some kind of computer-based learning out of necessity. And that is different. That's different from creating a model where you're now going to say like, okay, and because it's easier to monitor students, we're going to give you 150 students.
Right. Very, very different.
Yeah.
Very, very different things. And not...
but not outside the scope of possibility.
Not outside the scope of possibility. It definitely, some unions would have to fold.
Oh man,
on that.
There would be walkouts. There would be riots.
There would be a lot.
Like all of it.
There would be a lot.
And let me tell parent hat.
Yeah,
I don't want. So I have a graduating senior, and then my 7th grader.
Yeah,
I absolutely would fight tooth and nail if the expectation for his education was to be in a sea of students.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even agree with that at the college model when you've got hundreds of people in an auditorium, but an adult student or an almost adult student can process that better than a young student.
Right. Yep. And they actually did bring that because a lot of the educators there were not K-12. They were college level. So they were actually imagining possibilities to better connect with their students and get more human contact with their students in those 100-person lecture halls that they teach.
Oh, that's a small one.
And so that was an interesting perspective as well.
It really was.
Like there's that possibility there. It can very much go off the rails and really hurt K-12 teachers. But it can also bridge the gap.
It can. I think this leads us to a good conversation point. I'm going to butcher his name. G-E. Wang.
Yeah.
Freaking incredible human being.
This researcher, teacher, professor.
Such a vibe.
Dude, he was awesome. He's a computer scientist who is also a musician as well. So he'll put together like a Stanford digital orchestra where all kinds of different AI machines are playing different things together. He had AI
create beatboxing.
Yeah,
we witnessed it.
Yeah,
that was crazy.
It was so cool.
And they were using email addresses as the tonality.
Yeah,
and made up words.
There was another. So he had this. He has a maker class, which is very cool. So it's it's basically just like student open inquiry. Students get to create their own projects. All it has to do is really demonstrate the creativity and the learning and the skills. So one was like a little hand. That sang. So depending on where it was in the AI's
like a Thurman
view
kind of
and
a model.
How big the mouth was open, it would change the pitch and the volume. It was really
because he
cool
was saying
project.
make something absurd.
Exactly.
Because it's about
silly.
making. It's about Chris Peach said much the same. Like, can you go do the most absurd, wonderful moment that has no value?
Yeah, joy and beauty.
Bring joy and beauty through technology. But I think that circling back to the 150 kids per teacher.
Yes.
He brought up that question, very wonderful rhetorical question of what do we want from AI?
Yes.
And then he followed it up with a subtext question of how do we want to live with AI?
Right.
Because we're shaping that right now. How do we want it in our society?
Exactly. And a really interesting thing that he also brought up was some things are hard.
Some things
about learning are hard. And some things in life are hard. But you get through those experiences. The only way out is through. So if AI becomes a modality wherein you can sidestep that hard, and then you might also be sidestepping, what we call the good heart, the zone of proximal development. You might be missing out on some learning experiences that would be transformational.
The way that he did that. He talked about hiking the John Muir Trail.
Yeah.
And so, he was like, it sucked.
It sucked. There were more mosquitoes than I'd ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
I didn't even know there was that many mosquitoes on Earth.
But then he talked about getting to, is it Emigration Lake or one of those lakes up there.
Yeah, Alpine Lakes.
And he was like, he's like, I could have been dropped in by a helicopter and stood on the ridge and taken a picture and enjoyed the beauty of it.
Nice photo moment.
But it wouldn't have had the impact of the, what did he say, like 22 days on trail getting there. The difficulty hiking, and the mosquitoes and the everything.
Switchbacks.
That when you're, like, we've all been through those. They really are awful. They suck when you're in it. But when you look back, you're like, oh, it really added value.
It did. Right? Because then once you get to the top of the mountain, you earned that view. Yeah. You earned it. And there's nobody else there.
I know.
And I love backpacking. So it did resonate a lot for me.
It works.
For that metaphor. But
I mean, I think about like the meaningful moments with students. Sometimes they've been the hard moments. Really I took students backpacking in Yosemite, actually on the John Muir Trail.
This dude did this.
Like 8 days, 8th graders.
Yeah.
It was amazing. But I mean, we spent 8 days together, right? And this is now coming on about 10 years ago, backpacking in the high country of Yosemite. The most vivid memory that I have, and when I see these students, they bring it up again, was sleeping on granite at Lower Cathedral Lake at like 11,000 feet with a tarp, like literally like a row of sardines, like boys and girls together, right? Wow. We all like slept side by side in our sleeping bags and then pulled a tarp over us. And I have a picture of like looking down my row of students, and I had taught them for like 5 years in a row. Yeah. Covered in frost. Because that high mountain lake, cold. Right? It was so cold. And then there's one student about halfway through that had woken up, and he's sitting up. I love this kid. Texted him yesterday.
That's how.
And he's just like miserable. He's just cold and suffering and miserable. But it goes back to that thing of, we talked a lot about before we went, like the trail breaks everyone in just the right way.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why backpacking is so amazing. And I think that I'm worried that we're taking away the discomfort that actually makes the experience sometimes.
100%. Yes.
So a little cautionary moment there. And I don't know how to get around that.
No, I don't either. But then, like that presentation was so good, and it brought up so many really, really deep philosophical questions about the possibilities, right? Yeah. The possibilities are beauty, joy, personalized learning in a way we never could have imagined.
Amanda Bickerstaff, quote, "We don't need to make better worksheets."
Yeah.
I was like, I could just like shake your hand.
That was good. That was good stuff. Like those moments were so good. Really identifying the disconnects that are there. Like there's disconnects between big tech companies and academia. There's disconnects between industry and academia. There's disconnects between the layers of academia down to your K-12, down to your other program, down to your public programs. There's disconnect between teachers and admin. Like so many different disconnects were identified. Yeah. And like how do we bridge those things? It was just wonderful to see that's being identified. And also on the other side of things, it was a disconnect between what an AI can do, like the possibilities that are there, but then the disconnect between curriculum and assignments that suck. Like other way to say it. Where it was just like, if you're actually trying to infuse bad pedagogy with artificial intelligence, it's only going to be translational. It's never going to be transformational. It's never going to be transcendent. No. It's only going to be.
And it doesn't educate better.
No.
It doesn't make the experience easier on the teacher or the student.
No.
There's no more value.
No value is added.
I think this is at the heart of so many teachers that are like, kids are so tired of technology. They hate technology. They don't want to ever use technology in my class. And inside I'm dying a little bit because I'm like, oh, like I'm going to be really judgmental here and say it's probably how you're using it.
Yeah. That,
because kids are into it. Kids are inquisitive, and the humans are inquisitive. They want to learn.
Yes.
And
I keep trying
the
to
equity
convince people that
happens through technology, like the possibilities of levelizing playing fields and
it's an exciting
allowing
time
access to equal opportunity from completely different starting levels. Like,
yeah.
So,
yes.
But I love when she was like, we don't need to just make better worksheets. Like, girl, you are at my heart.
Yeah. There definitely are people in terms of pedagogical theory, 100%.
So much. But then the rub, right? We had a rub throughout the day. It was all like, like if we can just get really, really good tools into the hands of teachers and train them well, they'll be able to we'll be able to change the world.
Right.
And I wish, but we also know, and it wasn't brought up ever yesterday.
Not even Pat?
I mean, I'm sure if Pat and I talked to, Pat, I mean, a little bit.
Pat at code.org.
Pat was wonderful.
He was awesome. He was another one of those devil as advocate guys where on his panel, he's just
but,
it's not
the idea that if we can just tool up teachers with good tools, we'll change the world.
Right.
And we know that's not the case.
No.
I mean, I'm gonna be a little Nirvana here, right? Teachers want to be effective. They want to help students. Yeah, there's battle axey people out there that don't anymore, and they should just go out of the career. But that's fine.
Right.
But we also know that like district level people organize trainings.
Yep.
And then you go and you do those trainings, and the site level administration circumvents the whole thing. And they're like, well, this really doesn't fit into what we're doing because we have to hit our HMH curriculum with validity.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, how do you do that worksheet from the Blackline Master Book? And it sounds comical, but we've witnessed
but it's real out there.
I mean, like teachers are literally like, I wish I could do this, but I can't because it's not in the pacing guide that came from, whatever.
Yeah. And like, when we go to these trainings, especially as we're moving into consulting and
we're seeing a lot of people,
districts and training districts and teachers about how to use artificial intelligence and innovate with it right now in this space, they'll be like, what tools are you going to use so we can unblock them?
Yeah.
And it's just like,
which AI apps?
What?
And these are institutions that are self-selecting to bring us out.
Yeah.
So they're already on the side of let's go here.
Right.
And yet we're still seeing that blockage.
Yeah. Oh no, we blocked everything. But we'll unblock it for your visit.
I don't know. Dude,
I don't know.
Tiny URL was blocked at one of the places.
No.
I'm like, why is that blocked?
That doesn't make any sense.
Like none of the people could get my slides.
Oh, great.
I'm like, well done. Okay.
Thanks.
Here, let me pop up a QR code from Google.
Yeah. Let me do this.
Is that blocked?
Okay. What? Is Google blocked?
I mean, we could continue chatting. There was so many wonderful thought moments.
So many.
Like I felt so lucky to be in that room.
Oh, for real.
Right? It was surreal.
It was amazing. It was awesome. Just the conversations that were had with no air of superiority.
No,
really.
And we were in the ivory tower.
That was very surprising to me because I did not expect that to happen. I actually expected to very awkwardly
shy off to the
not
side.
fit in
like,
to
why
this.
are you here?
But yeah, and they're like, how did you get
How
here?
did you get in?
But,
guards? Wedding crashers.
It's exaggeration, but when you go to the heart of where everything is and talk to the people at the place.
We always say use the tool, do the thing. Like this is the place, the research university.
Literally. There was just so much more candor than I expected and really, really trying to get at the heart of what the challenges are.
And willingness to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
We heard that all often.
day. It was just every conversation
like,
was,
that's interesting.
I have
I don't know.
more questions than I have answers. I still have more questions.
Yeah, that's the edge. That's where we're at. It was so reassuring to hear that.
It was.
Let's end with the fireside chat.
Yeah, okay.
This was so good.
So this whole day, this whole summit, all these events all day, different panels, different research, students presenting their research. You know,
a poster session.
It was amazing.
To end all poster
it was
sessions.
So cool. Just during lunch, you could just walk around and talk to graduate students, PhD candidates, and researchers conducting the area. They were just hanging
forefront.
out. So we're just like having a sandwich and be like, oh, what are you doing? Oh,
yeah.
Oh, that app looks cool. When's that coming out? Like, like it was very rad. But then at the end of the day, we ended with two thought leaders in this field, Saul Kahn and
Khan Academy,
and Chris Peach, who is Code in Place.
Yep.
Which is a international
very cool
coding.
So much about equity.
Democratizing
technology.
He was so cool.
Yeah.
I really would like to talk to him more. His energy was amazing, and he was really focused on what joy can this technology bring to students and teachers. How can this make us more human? And that's been my question too since the beginning. I was just like, yes.
His research, dude, he's prolific too.
He is.
He's
five papers last year, dude. Well done, sir.
While also running,
all of it and teaching and just coding. And really what he was talking about is when we talk about how this technology can be transformational.
Yes.
Where he was just like, okay, so when it came out, I thought my job as a teacher was done because he was going to have to hang up his hat. I love teaching. I love interacting with students. I really like it. Like, he's such a cool human. But he was like, everybody talks about writing and how it's good at writing and how it can do math. But he's like, what it can really do is code. Dude. Like that is its skill. So he was like, what do I actually need to do? Like, how do I stay relevant at all?
Yeah.
And maybe it'll take away my job and maybe people won't really need to learn to code anymore. But he was like, actually, that's not what I've seen. No. In the last year, I've seen more people and more students get into coding than ever before because it's more fun than it's ever been.
Classes have increased.
Exactly. And he's like, because it's more fun. Mm-hmm. It brings more fun to the process. And then he's like, what my classes look like now is I ask students what they want to create. What's your craziest, wildest, most joyful, most interesting thing?
The most wonderful and absurd thing you can make.
He's like, what's the craziest thing?
That has no purpose.
And and he's like, bring that, very, very similar to Ge from earlier, where he was just like, okay, so I want you to bring me these ideas, this creativity, this, divergent thinking, and you don't know how to make it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to teach you the fundamentals.
Right. He's like, give me 4 weeks.
4 weeks. I will teach you the fundamentals of how to interact with AI and teach you actually the fundamentals behind what's happening. And then we spend the rest of the time making your thing. And I was just like, yes, that's perfect. Like project-based learning at its best.
He was really about having something to show at the out.
Yeah, exactly. End. Yeah, we talked to him after. He was like, and I was like, oh yeah, I teach music. And he was like, that's awesome because it's the same thing. And he called it a privileged domain where it's actually like a discipline wherein the discipline itself is set up to do project-based learning, which music and computer science are that way. You are making a thing. You're doing a performance. You're sharing that with people that you love and your peers. And that modality is just so good. Yeah. So real.
I love his forward thinking in that term of like, how does this bring joy? How does this, I think he actually said spark joy.
Yeah.
Right.
He did.
Nice little nod to.
Love it. Yeah.
But, and the way that he interacted with Saul Kahn, right? So like Chris Peach and Saul Kahn were the two people, and there was a moderator.
Yep.
And Saul Kahn had brought up that he's writing a new book, or new book is coming out, and I love that he was like, "Of course there is." So he's writing a book on AI and education. Of course there is. I loved his candor, but he was like, "What I really wanted to do was write a science fiction book."
Yeah. He's like,
Saul Kahn. He's like, I love science fiction. I really wanted to write a science fiction book. They're like, stay in your lane, Kahn. Like,
He was like, I brought it to the publisher, and they were like, no,
that's not your thing.
No.
Right. And so, Saul Kahn brought it up as this like that's what I wanted to do, but now I'm doing this other thing. And he kind of led off into another topic. But, like 45 minutes later, Chris Peach was like, I want you to do that.
Yeah.
That's the most exciting thing I've heard ever.
Yeah, he was like, that's the best thing from this conference. You need to do that.
Yeah. And so, we talked a lot about Conmigo,
Yep.
Khan Academy's kind of Socratic machine.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than that.
It is.
But, we were talking this morning. We're like, dude, Sal Khan, like you need to use your own machine to train yourself how to write.
Exactly.
And then publish it under a pen name. And just flex.
Just do
Either
it.
way.
Just go.
Flex
just
on the
go
side
with
of
it.
it taught me how and I got published.
Yep.
Or it taught me, but it wasn't good enough. So we're doubling back
Right.
and retraining the model.
Right.
Sal Khan just spoke in beautiful metaphors
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Somebody raised a question from the audience about widening the inequities. Mm-hmm. Like, and
that
we
is a
should
concern.
be worried about these,
And
right?
bias.
We should be worried about these things. We see school districts all over the place that are trying to ban or block.
Yep.
And those students will not be prepared.
No.
They're using it on or rather we're creating a place to foster dishonesty.
Ooh, yeah. That's
And
a good way
and
to
I'm here
put
for it.
That's a good
It's
way to put
disruption.
it. Yeah.
Right?
Disrupt.
It's disruption. But somebody brought this up. Like, are we worried because Khan Academy is a paid model?
Right.
And he did talk about like, hey, we're really hoping as prices come down, maybe it'll be like $20 a year for Conmigo.
Yeah. Instead of a month.
Instead of per
year.
month, like $20 a year. And that will offset the cost. And I think he said like, so in the Philippines and India, we could offer it for like $5 a year.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
That's
And so he was
really
talking about this
interesting.
and then he slipped into this metaphor that spoke to me. And because people were like, well, inequity. It's building inequity. And he said, it's really not about the tool. It's about what happens when you remove the tool. And I was like, I haven't thought about it that way. And so he gave this metaphor of a library. And so he's like, let's talk about the library in Palo Alto, right? Very affluent place.
Oh yeah.
This is Bay Area, Silicon Valley.
Most
this
expensive
is
place to live on.
yeah, like
Earth.
this is money.
Yep.
And he was like, there's a wonderful library. And he goes, and if you go there, it's probably mostly affluent people that are accessing it because it's their public library in their community. And this is where they live.
It's beautiful.
And he was like, but to get back to like what happens when you remove it. And so this really cool place has been built and it's building community and people are accessing it. But if you pull it away, if you closed it, what would happen? And he said, these people have means. They would find other means. They would fill that need in other places. And I think you referenced like if your kid needs a tutor for $50 an hour, these are the people that are going to pay for that. Yeah. Whereas other people are like, I can't pay $5 a month for a tutor.
Yeah.
And so I love that he was like, they will find another way. But then the reflection side of that is, what if you pull that away from people who don't have the means?
Yep.
And so he was like, it's not the
library.
tool itself that builds inequity. It's understanding like how needful is it? Is it filling a gap that is not fillable elsewhere? And it really made me think, I was talking to somebody from Google. They were talking about Google fiber optics and all of this stuff. This was a number of years ago. And they were talking, he was just such a cheerleader, rawing for like how incredible they were increasing access to the internet. And I'm sitting there kind of biting my tongue a little bit because all the maps that they were showing, they were showing all the ones that have good political clout of like all of our inner cities.
Right.
And I couldn't help but say in metropolitan areas, I couldn't help but think about students that I have that live like 3 hours from campus, including like 45 minutes down a dirt road.
Yep.
And it's like an hour to get to cell service.
Yeah.
There's no Wi-Fi. They don't have electricity. They're solar. Things
You're
like
driving
that.
an hour and a half to a Starbucks.
And so, yeah, literally,
maybe
my student drove 45 minutes to a Starbucks a couple days a week to get work done online. And so when we talk about access and equity, I think that getting in trouble again. A lot of the people holding that conversation are in academia or business that is in a very, very urban environment.
Right.
And that's their lens. It's like, I love Southern California, but when you talk to them, they have no idea about Northern California.
No, there's a disconnect.
When I'm like, I'm an hour and a half north of Sacramento, they're like, oh, Oregon? I'm like, no, babe, that's still like 4 more hours.
No, California's real big.
Yeah. But,
you're way down there.
When we talk about access. So to me, Saul Khan was saying like, okay, you laid fiber optic cables in San Francisco and you made internet available to students that didn't have it. Well, in my head, like, the school district could have paid any of 6 other companies for that. Whereas there are still places in this state where it does not exist. There is zero access to that infrastructure.
Well, I mean, that's...
And so like when you imagine giving internet to our very rural areas and then pulling it away.
Yeah.
They have no other access to it. So I think that was the metaphor that Saul was getting to. It's that the tool itself isn't what builds inequity. No. It's the population that it serves, how needful it is there. And I think that this pairs really well with Emma Brunskill's work also.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Here's the Cliff Notes. I just love that she was saying that in their research, the AI-assisted models had the greatest benefit for the lowest performing students.
Yeah.
And her takeaway was that it's not amplifying existing gaps and disparities.
No, it's not.
It's actually closing gaps in knowledge in her, at least in her research. And I couldn't tell you who the population was or anything like that. Right. But I love that idea of thinking like, yeah, AI has the possibility of widening the gap.
It does.
Okay. It absolutely does.
But that's mostly because...
That's because of political choice.
Political choice.
And I don't mean governmental I mean the politics of power.
Yeah. The politics of within schools and school districts.
Yeah.
These are political organizations. You don't really often think of it that way.
Yeah.
It's a really strange time with that where, access and equity, it's mostly about access. You have to have access to the tool. So if you take the tool away, you no longer have access to the tool. That is what creates inequity.
Builds worse inequity.
And another thing that Saul Khan identified was about bias, right? We've been talking about bias in AI a lot. And actually specifically school districts want us to speak to them about that.
They're asking us like, can you address
when
bias?
we go out for training. So it's like, I hadn't really thought that much about it because, my thinking on it was, well, bias does exist. It's the human experience, and you have to unlearn. You have to unlearn the bias that's been coded into you,
learn
right?
To recognize.
And you have to learn to reflect. You have to learn to see those moments where your thinking is going sideways because of the way that you have been encultured,
right? Essentially.
So he was just like, okay, so bias does exist in the real world.
Absolutely.
In the real,
Everywhere.
there's no situation wherein bias is not going to exist. And he was like, the fear is that, say you're using AI to write, and this is the example to use. You say you're using AI to write a recommendation letter for a student,
right? And
their name is different. It might write a worse letter for the ethnic sounding name, and it might write a better letter for the white sounding name.
Yeah.
But he was like, I guarantee you, if you took a panel of 10 people writing recommendation letters, the exact same thing would happen. And he was like, we're actively looking for that in our systems. We're actively auditing our systems to eliminate that.
Yeah.
You cannot audit people.
Yeah, you can't audit. I love, because he was saying, like, we'll talk bottom line, like, these are companies and they want to make money.
Yes.
Therefore, they have to protect their name, which is on the product. And so he was like, he's like, if it puts out some horrible thing. He referenced his daughter. This was hilarious. He referenced his daughter using his own product,
product,
and she typed in, "How do I beat the other team?"
Yeah,
and they were talking about some kind of activity.
School.
And it flagged and notified the teacher of physical violence and him.
Like, And so like,
but he was like, if AI puts out something awful, they're going to screenshot it and they're going to share it. And that reflects back on their name, their
company,
brand identity.
brand.
And so they're actively trying to mitigate that.
So this is very different than social media. Let's just kind of end on that note, where social media was a disaster. And that was, everyone agreed.
You speak about it as if it's in the past.
I know. Social media, or at least the how they were going to, like the ship has sailed now.
Yeah.
And, Congress is going at them about it. But it's been, years
they still made
and
their
years
money.
and years. They made their money. They made their impact. They did the damage. It's done. And that was fully acknowledged at Stanford. The whole day, the whole summit, everybody really was like, yeah, we cannot repeat that. We cannot repeat that mistake again with this technology, because it is on the verge of being far more transformative and far more impactful than social media has been in positive ways. But what this is most interesting to me about it is that point where actually morals, ethics, human flourishing, and goodness is what is actually incentivized.
Yeah. It's very different.
And that's what the brand depends on.
Yeah.
What?
And
since when have we seen anything like that?
I know. And Sal Khan called it out, where he was like, social media, like if a user posts something awful, the social media companies are like, well, that's not us.
Exactly.
We only
That's
create
them.
the platform.
It's the platform.
Where the AI companies are like, oh crap, that is us. Like
That
we
is
have to
us.
monitor this. And he talked about Khan Academy specifically, Khanmigo, like really training teachers and students to not put in private information.
Exactly.
But he goes, but it happens. And so not only are they working on the front end, training people how to have digital literacy and these things that are super important.
Yep.
But he goes, but on the back end, we know that human nature, they're going to do that sometimes. And so they're coding in ways to
block
scrape
that out
and get rid of it.
Yep.
And I like that he said Khanmigo is purely transactional, that the information that students are doing does not go back and train their model.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we need to talk more about
fascinating
that with some industry leaders sometimes.
Definitely.
Because I've gotten that question often from people.
Definitely. Yeah. Let's ask Google today.
Oh, I know. We're going to lunch with Google.
Yeah.
I
That's
love
the
it.
next big news.
All
We'll
right.
have to
Let's
debrief
close
about
up with one word takeaway. What's your one word takeaway from the AI and Education Summit at Stanford University?
My one word takeaway is joy.
Oh, that's my word.
Dang it.
Joyful.
Joyful.
Okay, then I'm going to say my one word is a noun compound. It's Chris Peach.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to this guy.
The overarching,
fantastic.
I think it's important that we have critical lenses when we talk about anything that's going to affect protected populations.
Yep.
Period.
And teaching and those
I
interactions.
do have pushback for how part of the day was run.
Totally.
Some of the things that were lacking in it. And I think that that's really only what makes things better. But at the end, joyful. I felt honored as a professional. I felt honored as a classroom teacher. I felt honored as somebody who has played around and pretended to know what they're doing with artificial intelligence. And everyone in that room commented the same thing. There are no experts. We're only people that have been playing with it longer than you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And I think it was Amanda Bickersley. She also brought up, we don't treat teachers like professionals. That's problem number one.
I know she
threw down. She was calling it out.
Okay. We have so much more we could talk about, but Stanford, if you're listening, thanks for having us.
It was an incredible
event. The rest
event.
of you, I really appreciate you.
Thanks for listening. And you heard it here first. The AI Summit, they actually did film it, and sections and panels will be posted.
Last year's available on their website already. So
last year's you can go and check it out, and then this year's will be posted soon. You can probably see the back of our heads.
I know, right? So the people still listening, here we'll pose a question to you. Where can we find joy in education through artificial intelligence?
Love it.
See you.